let's talk to Jonathan Davis. He's an economist and a wealth advisor and joins us now. Good morning to you, Jonathan.
Hello, Julia.
Hello. Everyone is, everyone, lots of people, most people I think, are very angry about this. The polling is very clear that calling on politicians to clamp down on the issues of tax avoidance, as well as, of course, tax evasion, which itself is illegal. Do you think the public is right to want to clamp down?
My first thought is that the people are revolting. I think there's got to be a bit of a difference here between the multinational corporations who make vast profits by doing business in this country, but then somehow using the international tax laws, actually they did the business somewhere else. That to me is unconscionable, and I don't accept it. Individuals, however, have a right, and as far as I can tell, a duty to pay as little tax as possible within parliamentary laws, of course.
Well, wait a minute, a duty. I mean, look, everybody has a right to minimise their tax bill. Of course they do, and within the bounds of the law. But I mean, you could actually argue it's the other way around. It's companies that have a duty to their shareholders. There is no company in the world whose the order of business effectively is to protect the taxpayers of any particular country from having to pay more tax. So it's the duty of a company to make sure their shareholders profit the most. But an individual, you have no duty to minimise your tax bill.
I agree with you. Of course, everyone should minimise their tax bill if they possibly can. I think there is, however, a question over multinational corporations who are allowed by the international tax laws to get away with clearly, basically, not paying taxes on profits that they make. Now, you and I, we pay taxes on our income. Very rich people reduce their taxes on their wealth largely. It's very difficult to reduce taxes on income these days. But let's face it, everyone saves tax where they can. Yeah. Don't we all have ISAs? Don't we all pay into pensions? Aren't these tax savings vehicles?
Well, they are tax savings, but they are encouraged by the government. Look, even when you buy your duty-free at the airport, I've never understood why we have that, frankly. I don't think we should be encouraging people to get their cheap booze and fags and perfume and things. It seems to me to be just that that's a tax bonus for the wealthy, because if you can afford to get a flight, you're hardly struggling. But this is the thing, that's a very different thing, isn't it, from as you say, multinational corporations doing dodgy deals. But what about what most of us would regard as dodgy deals? What about the individuals, the Bonos, the Queens, the Lewis Hamiltons? Lewis Hamilton is under fire because he is alleged he basically bought his private jet deliberately in a way that would minimise his tax bill. Now, it seems to me you'd be crazy not to do that. And this is a man who spends an awful lot of his time abroad. He's registered in living in Monaco. He constantly travelling around the world. I've got to be honest with you, I don't have a particular problem with Lewis Hamilton, who is, by definition, his job is international, choosing to live where he pays the least amount of tax.
You know, it's interesting. There you have an individual, although perhaps we shouldn't be focusing on individuals, but anyway, who lives in Monaco in order to save tax. I'm reminded of the movie Casablanca. Captain Renault says, I'm shocked that there's gambling going on in this casino. So yes, the point is, back in 1936, for example, Baron Tomlin in the House of Lords said, this guy was a judge, every man is entitled, if he can, to order his affairs so that the tax is less than it otherwise would be. And of course you would, wouldn't you? The question you pose is, if people are saving taxes, does that mean that we're getting less spent on public services? No, I don't think it is. Historically, you look through the last 2,000 years, the rich have never paid tax to the same extent that the middle class pay tax. You and I are middle class. Most of your listeners are middle class. We, as a percentage of our income and wealth, we pay more tax than the rich.
And that's because you say most of the super wealthy, the money they have doesn't come from income, it comes from wealth. It's taxed in a different way. They're not PAYE, are they?
Yep.
Their income will come in, say, corporation tax, dividends, taxed at a lower rate.
Well, simpler than that even. They own a home.
Yep.
And if they 20 years ago had £1 million home in central London, it's now a £20 million home. They've made £19 million tax-free. So, it's very simple to avoid taxes. And indeed, as you say, if you're already an international, shall we say, business person, then of course you're doing business all over the world. So you can set your wealth and your income in certain tax jurisdictions. I must say again, though, what flies in the face of reality, or whatever the word is, appropriateness, is Google or Apple or whomever making literally billions in the UK based upon UK trade, but not paying taxes based upon that. That is something that the governments, the G20 of the world need to get to grips with, and the international companies need to start paying their way. For example, in America, you get American-based businesses who are paying large amounts of tax. Then you get other American companies like Google who base their activities in Ireland, of all places, and they pay practically no tax, and yet they're an American business. That's nonsense.
Is there an argument that if there were the political will, and I do worry with politicians that everyone talks a good game, but even the likes of Jeremy Corbyn, yes, he doesn't want private donations, things like that, but at the end of the day, the only way of getting politicians to tackle this issue is if you take the politics out of our politics, the money out of our politics, and once you do that, that would affect things like trade union payments to politicians as well, and no one wants to cut their own source of private finance for their political party, and there just isn't the political will in America, in Europe, I mean, in the UK. In which case, will this never happen? Will you never be able to close down these international tax havens simply because you're never going to get unanimity around, say, the table of the G20?
Well, as that happens, I actually believe that Britain, in its fair-minded attitude normally that we have, and we do in many ways, we set the tone in many things around the world, we could actually take a unilateral position on this if we cared about it. With regards to money in politics, strange as it may seem, I am for political parties being funded by the state.
Me too.
That way, you take away the vested interests, such as tax avoiders and multinationals, and indeed trade unions. So it's all related. We could actually say to Google, if you make a profit here, you pay the same tax that a small businessman pays.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key thing for most people listening right now. We want to know, and as it means, I want to know that the tax I pay on my income from whatever source is taxed at the same rate as the bloke down the street and the bloke in the private jet. I'm intensely relaxed, as Peter Mandelson once said, about the rich people getting rich. I've got no problem as long as you pay the same rate of tax as anyone else does on that money, or a higher rate, obviously, because you're earning that much more. Jonathan Davis, lovely to talk to you, economist and wealth advisor.